Welcome to the Low Carb USA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're super honored to have Bethany McKenzie here joining us today. And she runs a site called Let Me Be 83, My Dude with Diabetes. So she shares her life with helping her son through the challenges of type 1 diabetes. And along the way, she's formed this massive Facebook page and has as many people come and listen to her where she can share tips and her experiences and anything with her following. I think it's up to almost 40,000 people now and growing, hopefully. The reason why she got on our radar, again, we've been following this for many years, is there's a movie just released called The Diabetes Solution. And I love it because it's the same as Dr. Bernstein's book that we recommend and you guys recommend so often for people to understand how to improve the lives of family members, children, and anyone you touch who's living with diabetes. So Bethany, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you here to tell people what you're doing. And on your site, it says your site is a blog for better blood sugars, a charity to challenge the establishment, a way of life to win at diabetes, and a mom on a mission. And we just love the way that you share your experiences and information to empower other families. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love chatting about my son and our success, and I try and tell our story just in a very common way. I mean, all the mothers out there caring for their children with diabetes have a lot in common. They want their children to thrive and they want them to do their best. So I just tell our story from my point of view, and I'm so lucky to have a son who will allow me to share our story.
Yeah, that's so great that you can empower him. And, you know, the movie highlights the struggles that are given to, I feel like they're given to, instead of empowering families, there's some misinformation that's been given to families about how they should live with diabetes and what they should eat. It's all, it's all about mostly what the food entails to deal with type 1 diabetes, but also there are outside influences of what's going to affect blood sugar. We know that, stress and things that happen in life and traveling and maybe life experiences are going to add to that. But it's mostly diabetes is what do you eat and how do you deal with how your body processes that food, right? So in the movie, The Diabetes Solution, you go through what each family who's on the movie experienced when they were first diagnosed. It's a very scary diagnosis. It's life-threatening. And then you go through what the recommendations are to start out how to help your child. If you're a mom or a dad who has a child who's diagnosed, how to feed them and how to treat them. And the roller coaster of carbohydrate insulin is just out of this world.
It's tragic, and it is scary. The diagnosis is scary. The complications are gruesome. A missed dose of insulin can be fatal. And parents know this, and they know it's scary when their child is diagnosed. But they're given, I feel like when a child is diagnosed, a family has this moment where they are willing to change everything, right? And you ask any layperson on the street, what should people with diabetes not eat? Every last one of them will say, sugar. I think it has something to do with sugar. So these families are in the hospital and they see their kid who's wasting away in a hospital bed because most of them have lost so much weight. And they want an answer. They want an action plan, right? Mm-hmm. They could have told me anything to go do and I would have done it for my son. And instead, the advice they give you is don't change anything. Let your kid be a kid. Go home. If they want ice cream before bed, give them ice cream before bed and give them insulin, which is tragic and scary and dangerous. And in that moment where they have a captive audience of motivated parents, they completely lose them with those words, don't change a thing. And these parents, they leave the hospital and, it's a 24-hour disease and you're scrambling. What do I feed them? How do I measure this? What kind of math do I perform? And they feel like the math ratio, they feel like that's their saving grace. Like, I can do math, I can weigh food. It doesn't work. It's not as simple as they present it in the hospital. So you see these families leave the hospital and spend a few months with this diagnosis, and they just can't catch a break, right? They're wearing a continuous glucose monitor. They watch their kids' breakfast spike shoot way up, and they give them insulin, and then they're going low, and they're in the nurse's office. And then they've kind of lost them, right? It's just a gloomy situation that then the only option you have is to kind of make a joke about it. And they post these graphs on social media and say, oh, bummer, another bad day. Can't control anything. Diabetes sucks. That's because without a solution, without an action plan, all you can do is blame diabetes. And that's what you see so commonly in these social media groups.
Yeah, it's such a tragedy. And, I think you said that you spent about 3 years following the traditional standard of care advice that you received from your primary care and your endocrinologist, which was, like you were saying, don't change anything. And here's the prescription for the insulin that's going to help manage these highs and lows, high blood sugars.
Right. I love to tell this story because I come from a very medical family. Many members of my own family are in medicine. My husband's a doctor. I've been very open about that.
Ah.
And in my life, I've never had a reason to not trust a doctor.
Yeah.
Right? I grew up with them, Thanksgiving table conversations. I was in on all of that. And I never challenged them. And I never had a reason to think I would be misled.
Yeah.
So for those 3 years, even though I questioned it in the hospital, there was a moment where the dietitian had me practicing with the little plastic fake foods. And she had pancakes and real maple syrup and orange juice. And I gave her a look and I thought, what are we doing here? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And my husband likes to laugh about it. He thinks they didn't think I understood the math. When all along I was thinking, what are we doing to my kid? But I was the perfect marketing client at that moment. You have a doctor tell me to go home and perform math and dose insulin. I'm good at that. I can do that. And I don't have a reason to question you. So I did it. I did it for 3 years, thinking that was what was best for my child. They give you all kinds of reasons too, that you don't want them to feel different, that kids are magically protected from complications. They tell you that. Oh, and the other one they love to tell you is, we believe the cure is 5 to 10 years away. So all these parents go, oh, well, that's a sigh of relief. Even if these 5 to 10 years are horribly chaotic, we know that's coming, so we'll get through it. They've been telling people for decades that the cure was around the corner. And I'm hopeful maybe someday, but I'm not waiting and jeopardizing my kids' childhood hanging on a cure, the hope for a cure. So
yeah, that's like the light at the end of the tunnel. If we can just get through this part, then everything will be better at this section. But what else happening in the middle here?
right.
I saw somebody write on one of your posts or somewhere else that was talking about treatments, and maybe the movie, I can't remember what it was, about our Low Carb USA events. And somebody said, I sure hope that they talk about type 1 diabetes. And I'll tell you what, we talk about diabetes all day long, type 1, type 2, whatever it is. When we can talk about what the standard of care right now is, the traditional standard of care, like you're saying, eat whatever you want and cover it with medication, or we can talk about ways to adjust diet and nutrition, and what does the research say, and how did we get here, and who can we help educate better, that carbohydrates are not an essential nutrient. And it sounds like, wait, what? But if we can start saying that, right, Bethany, if we can start saying that to more people, and they can start to say, maybe my gut was telling me, when the CDE, the Certified Diabetes Educator, was telling me to eat pancakes with syrup and orange juice, that my gut might be right, that might be too much. But not only is it not too much, that our bodies can actually manufactures the glucose that we might need for our brain and a couple of other cells in our bodies that do need some glucose, and can use it to grow, like they'll say. But then let's focus on protein and fat, which is what I know you've learned through your journey, mostly through, did you find Dr. Bernstein in the Diabetes Solution book and the groups on Facebook or on social media? Is that how you found it?
Exactly. At the time, I had my same blog, but it had a different name.
Uh-huh.
It had just been through a trial, a clinical trial at the University of Virginia, and I was posting about that.
Oh.
And a lot of the people from the low carb community were following along, and they would make comments, and they rescued me. I ordered the Dr. Bernstein's book on the way home from a vacation. I had left River, my son, for the first time ever when he was 8 years old to take my parents to the Adele concert in Minneapolis. And it was a 4-hour drive away, and I left him home. I had hired a medical student and her paramedic husband to watch him. And a mistake was made with his insulin dosing, and it was our rock bottom. I was up all night talking to this medical student saying, give him more sugar, please more sugar, you know, keep going, staying awake all night to make sure I didn't lose my kid on my one night away from him. And so on the drive back, I made a post in the Dexcom group, which is just a very general, all people with diabetes can belong to that group. And I said, please tell me how you people are doing it. I see some of you post these great blood sugars, these great A1Cs. I need to know how you're doing it. And sure enough, you know, word spread that here's this mom sincerely looking for help, and the comments trickled in and the graphs trickled in, and every fourth or fifth comment said, order Dr. Bernstein's book. Yeah. So I can go back to my Amazon account and scroll through, and I ordered that book on July 5th of 2016 on my drive home from the concert.
Wow.
And I got home and my kitchen was completely under construction, and I threw out all of our junk and we changed all of our diets cold turkey that day. I knew better. I had to do better. And what you were saying, we need to educate that carbohydrates aren't an essential macronutrient. That is especially scary for a parent when a doctor says they need carbs to grow and they need carbs for their brain to develop. As an adult, we can say, well, I'm already fully grown and I think my brain's where it's going to be for life. But when you're parenting a child and you're trying to get a young boy to grow and become the best that he can be, that news is so scary. But the book, Dr. Bernstein, you know, I think he's 87 or 88. If there's not a living example that people don't need carbohydrates to live a long, healthy life, he's kind of the poster child for that. And his story just spoke to my heart. It was the solution. I hate to use his word, but it was the solution we had been looking for.
Yeah, and it's such a blessing to the families. I mean, we've been right around that time, July 2016, we met Artie Dykman, who's in the movie and is very active on your page. And if anybody is listening and who doesn't know about the Type 1 Grit Facebook community page, it's like you were saying, it's full of supportive parents and adults who are living with diabetes, Type 1 diabetes, and anybody who's looking for inspiration or to ask a question. You're in a situation that you weren't sure about, or what you've seen other people doing, that you know, it's such a great resource. But you know, it's just super inspiring and empowering to find, like you said, it's a scary place to be, to find that, oh my gosh, my child needs carbohydrates, but they're having trouble processing them. And right. That's basically what diabetes is. The body cannot process the carbohydrates that are coming in. And then you're thinking, like, what a scary thought. You're thinking, well, if he needs these, how is he ever going to grow or grow into an adult and be able to do these things? I know we got a chance to meet little Dave at our 2016 conference, our very first one. Dave's RD spoke, and Dave was in attendance, and he got up on the stage, and he was a living, breathing, beautiful example of what not having carbohydrates in his life could be to other families and to the practitioners who are in the audience. We actually realized really quickly on that first conference that reaching the practitioner was so important, you know, that traditional standard of care and clinical guidelines, and the movie even mentions that so many doctors are kind of held to the recommendations of organizations. I don't know how the ADA has gotten so powerful and such a top leader in recommendations for the treatment of diabetes. I don't know how they've gotten to be there. They're a nonprofit organization who started out back in the day, and now they've somehow people think that they are the one true organization to look at for recommendations and guidance for standards of care. And their teaching and diabetes dietitians and certified diabetes educators are still learning, like RD said in the movie, an old outdated kind of treatment. If you look at what diabetes was treated before the invention of insulin, you had to cut things out of the diet because there was no insulin to bring it down, right?
Can I just jump in here quickly and say, because we're talking about the book and Dr. Bernstein and everything, but so you read the book.
Yes.
What actually happened? What did you do? What changed?
Mostly the food, right? We restricted all grains, starches, sugar, most fruits, sweet fruits. So the biggest change we made was the diet. But then once you remove all those carbs from the diet, my son was only 8 years old at the time, and he was receiving about 45 units of insulin a day. When we removed those carbs, his basal insulin, which is that 24-hour insulin, we cut that by like a third. He dropped down to maybe 15 units of insulin a day. So in Dr. Bernstein's book, he talks about insulin strategies. We also changed our insulin from the crazy expensive fast-acting insulins to an older insulin called Novolin R that's sold at Walmart for $24.88 a vial. So we're using,
as opposed to what? What's the other one?
$400 a vial for Novolog. Yes. So we use inexpensive insulin. It's safer. It's more gentle, especially for children. That fast-acting insulin, that was the cure-all. They said, oh, you can eat the American diet, jack yourself full of carbs and match it with this super rapid insulin. But to match those peaks of when carbs hit the bloodstream and when this fast-acting insulin hits the bloodstream, you almost never get it to line up. So you're either having a wild high blood sugar or a low blood sugar. So using Dr. Bernstein's method, we went to that inexpensive insulin. Now we dose insulin for his protein content, which you're never told in the hospital that protein can affect blood sugars. So it's a completely different way of thinking. And through my foundation, I've always said, parents need the right to choose. They need to be told at diagnosis. I know many families won't choose to do what we do, but you'd be surprised how many would and how many are ready to just make a big change. And so that's what I advocate for. The book changed everything.
That's amazing. And I think, and you probably do too, if more people were given that information from the very start and the very get-go, you're in a situation right at the beginning where you're almost desperate for what can I do for my child, because he's so sick, he or she is so sick. And you guys went home and changed everything. Some people might only do it for their sick child, or but most of the families end up doing it with everybody.
Right.
Find that it's not so difficult, and it's an empowering thing. It gives you a little bit more control, right?
Oh, it's intuitive, first of all. For most families, if a dietitian walked in when your skinny child is in a hospital bed and said, we're going to have to tweak your diet, most families would go, okay, I saw that coming, right?
Yes.
And I just talked about this the other day with a friend, because I know of a girl who's hospitalized in my hometown. And if someone would have told me, okay, go home, strip your cabinets of this, go buy this, it would have felt like a New Year's resolution. Something to get excited about. Like, here's a change our whole family can make. I'm that type of person. I want to do the things to make us all better. And when we all changed our diets, my husband lost weight, my asthma got better, which was wild. Maybe I have some kind of mild gluten allergy. We all feel better. It's been such a win for our whole family. And my husband, who is a physician, now he's using this information to help many of his patients. He sees a lot of patients with type 2 diabetes. And before we made the change, he didn't know how to empower them. He bought into the dogma. He thought the ones who are running high blood sugars just weren't taking care of themselves, when all along they were just doing what they were told to do. So it's been life-changing in many, many ways for our family.
So you mentioned that his basal insulin went down and stuff. What does a typical day look like for him now? I mean, what does he eat, and when and how much insulin do you need to administer through the day?
Sure. He's on a pump right now for his basal insulin, and he is deep into puberty, which commonly causes kids' insulin needs to rise pretty high. He's on about 40 units of basal insulin, so that's being delivered every hour, a trickle of insulin. His breakfast is huge. He eats a breakfast egg sandwich that has 2 eggs with sausage and cheese between them. He has like some bacon or sausage links on the side of that. About 3 times a month, we make almond flour Belgian waffles with almond flour and cream cheese and eggs. He has a giant one of those, and he either has a bowl of like a keto granola that's just nuts and seeds, or maybe a keto yogurt. So he has that for breakfast. For his lunch, he has cucumbers, sugar-free beef jerky or some kind of deli meat, pepperonis. I'll send a bag of Quest chips. Those are very easy and he loves those. And maybe some sort of low-carb treat if we have some kind of low-carb cookie. They sell the high-key cookies at Costco. And then for dinner, it's so easy. He eats steak and vegetables, broccoli, green beans, grilled chicken. It's just dinner is very, very simple. So he eats like an Olympian.
And as far as the insulin goes, it's those 40 units meted out through the day via the pump.
That covers his basal insulin. So the release from his liver of glucose throughout the day, that basal insulin is countering that. Right. His mealtime insulin, he gives, 3 to 4 units of that inexpensive R insulin for breakfast, and then anywhere between 6 to 8 units for dinner. He doesn't need a lunch dose. For some reason, it's low carb enough, and the tail of that R insulin is carrying him through lunch. So at school, my kid carries glucose in one pocket and his phone in the other, and you would never know he has diabetes. He's not having to go to the school nurse. There are literally no disruptions in his day. If he gets a little low, he reaches in his pocket and gives some glucose, but he is as normal as a teenage 8th grader could be.
That's wonderful. Good for him. And he's participating in sports. He's active, and
he is a nationally ranked tennis player.
Oh my goodness.
Before we changed his diet, he wasn't in sports at all. We couldn't. He literally, if I took him to a trampoline park with that much insulin in his body, his blood sugar would come crashing down. So that everything changed. He became an honors student when we changed his diet. His focus was better. His sports were better. His body composition. He looks like a Greek god, teenage boy building muscles going through puberty. It's every dream come true I had for my son. I get a little choked up thinking about this, but that's what you want as a parent, right? You want your teenage boy to be proud, to be active, to be excelling at school. And we got there. And it took being bold enough to make a decision. And Doug and I talked about this before you popped on, but you think of the obstacle parents have to overcome to get here. First of all, you have to overcome and think, no, my kid doesn't need carbs to grow. They don't need it for their brain. And then they change their diet. And then you go walking back into your endocrinologist and say, here's what I've done for my son. Well, then many of them will scold you. So it is layer upon layer of trying to dig yourself out of this burden of these guidelines to prove to doctors that omelets and broccoli are indeed good for all children. And I say that, I know I sound kind of snarky, but the word low carb diet gets people hung up. In the movie, Susan says, I'm also low alcohol. I'm low drug. I love her comments. Why are we defining it? We're eating a healthy diet. It happens to not have junk in it or starches, but it's what we should all be eating. That's my belief.
That's true. We actually met she's a physician assistant out in Virginia who we had done a small one-day event with a few years ago, and she said, if I say to any referring physicians or colleagues that I'm talking about what I do at my clinic, and if they want to refer patients, if I say anything about low carb or ketogenic, they turn off. But if she says I get my patients off sugar and processed food and we eat whole foods, meat and vegetables, they don't have any problem with that. I was like, good for you, that's great. And then, but if she says low carb or keto or any of those funky buzzwords, then people get turned off. And sometimes we wish we were called something else so that people didn't get turned off that way. But when people start to understand it, then that kind of loses that. Is that wrong? Is that something that we should avoid? Is that something that we've heard in the news media who's put out articles and studies show that this diet is so low on the popularity and it's dangerous and it's this and that, but you're really, like you said, eating whole healthy foods and you're adding fats back in and you're not afraid of red meat. And it's hard to explain to people who've heard things for so many years. I know you probably have River's lab work done, and double check everything. And how's it look?
It's amazing. And my dad, who I lost last year, and my brother are both heart surgeons. So when my dad was alive and they could chime in on his lab results, his lipid profile is beautiful. His triglycerides are like 40. He has beautiful LDL. HDL is nice and high. He's great. And I live in a state where red meat is incredibly popular. I'm in South Dakota and people here eat beef. When you cross the border by car into the state, they say, we eat animals in this state. It's kind of
we had some beautiful times that we spend in South Dakota. We love it there. And I know you eat one of the favorite things that we found in the restaurants was bison.
Yes.
I know us in the U.S. have gotten away from thinking that's a good thing to do. So many of us, we think of how tragic it was to lose so many bison here in the U.S. and what happened, a few hundred years ago. But it's actually a great source of meat. And if we can start seeing more of it ranched and sustainably done, it would be great. It's so nutritious, and some of the information out there about not eating it is just such it's doing a disservice, like so much of the information is it has so much nutrition in it, and it's just satiating, like you said. And River's building muscle and is really strong and super focused. What a great example he is, and you are to so many.
Thank you. He's such a good kid.
Oh,
so tell us about this movie. Was it all your project? Is it how did it come about? And tell us more about the movie.
I've been working on it for 3.5 years now. COVID obviously delayed the process, but I needed a way to get the message to people all over the world. Right now, social media has been our friend through Type 1 Grit. That's how we try to hook new people, but I needed to be able to tell the story in a way that could reach many people. And so I got to know these families, right? It's amazing how well you can get to know someone on social media and learn their stories. And I decided to go film them. I found a director in California, and my first filming was in Ventura, and I filmed 4 different families there, and the story started coming out. And it just all came together. I found the right people. They told their story. It was all very honest. I hope it doesn't appear to be propaganda. It's just people saying, this is what worked for me. This is what happened when I did this. This is what my kid can do now. I wanted shared experiences in the film. When you see Jamie Wells tell her story about dropping a $400 vial of insulin and
she made me cry.
Wasn't that awful?
Yeah.
But that is something any parent with diabetes can relate to, no matter how they manage their child's disease. So I just got lucky. I think when there's a story, it just tells itself. It's something that the world needs to know about, and it's been so amazing to see the response to it. I've received many messages from parents all over the world saying, we just sat down as a family and watched your film, and we decided we need to make a change. We've been wanting this, and you it pushed us over the edge. So the response, that's what I wanted. I want the people who want to hear about another option to hear about it, because then it's on them and they will find a way to dig themselves out of the hole.
What a fantastic endeavor that is, because think of all the lives that you're going to change.
I hope so. It's not me. It's the people. It's the people in the movie. They told their story. It took all of us. It was a group effort, and each person contributed their own part to the story. I do have cool news today.
Yes.
I sold, so the movie right now is streaming on iTunes, Apple TV, Google Play, Vimeo, worldwide, and YouTube. Today, I sold it to Gaia, which is another streaming network. They focus on health-related issues. And then a streaming network out of Mongolia also bought it today, which is, my distributor has never sold a film in Mongolia, but the film has been purchased in 48 countries. So that shows you all across the globe, everyone is dealing with these same, we like to blame it on the American Diabetes Association. It's a global issue. The Australian Diabetes Association, they're just as bad, if not worse. So it's a global issue.
Yes, it certainly is. And it's unfortunate that we'll kind of, like I did, we'll kind of take it in and just talk about the US or just Australia or just in the UK. Canadian is the same. And we've also met people from all over the world who've actually traveled to our conferences or saw them online or just found us from wherever they are in the world. We've had people come from Malaysia and Czechoslovakia on the other side of the world, and down so many from Australia and New Zealand, but from the islands. And, when you think about this is a problem everywhere. Carbohydrate intolerance. I know Dr. Berry said toxicity, but there's such a recommendation, and there's been such an inundation with processed food and sugar throughout the world that it's really scary to think that even just type 1 diabetes is growing and is such a problem, and it has a different root cause. We're talking about, and that's a totally different conversation. Is it autoimmune, or how is it type 1? How is a person getting type 1 diabetes to begin with? But there are more adults getting it. But almost 50% of the population now has type 2 diabetes, which used to only affect the elderly, and now more children are getting it, and young adults. And it has to be something that's happening in the environment. It's not just, it's got to be lifestyle and nutrition. So if we can get more and more information out to help people that this isn't have to be as bad as it is, we have to decrease the risks and of side effects and ill effects of high blood sugars. And it's just amazing what you're doing. I know that there is a conversation in the type 1 community as well about insulin resistance. So insulin not working as you continue to use it in high doses over the years, right? Is that something you guys talk about as well?
Totally. It's called double diabetes. So it happens to people with type 1 diabetes who don't make insulin, but then they eat so many carbs that they also develop insulin resistance. So now, that's the biggest doom situation. You're jacking yourself full of so much insulin, and it's not working. It's tragic, and there are studies being done. It's happening more and more in the type 1 community because of the horrible guidelines.
So effectively, they're developing type 2 diabetes as well, right?
It's called double diabetes, type 1 and type 2.
Wow.
Yes. Yep. And it's happening in children. And to overcome that as a child, when a child is obese, the chance of them becoming an adult and not being obese is almost insurmountable. So these kids who are on these high doses of insulin and they're not even sensitive to it, that's the worst of the worst for these kids.
It's heartbreaking. So we hope that we can be part of the message that helps spread the word about your work and the work on your website and through the movie. We're going to put links in the notes for people to find the movie and watch and share, because the more people can learn about this, the more people are empowered and can get through this and heal and not get sicker. It would just be amazing. We I don't know if I think we were talking, Doug and I are part of, Doug's the president. He helped start the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, and we want to reach as many practitioners and educators as we can who are helping families through this, that there is an option. And it's one of our missions of Low Carb USA always has been, is make sure that cutting out carbohydrates, therapeutic carbohydrate reduction is an option, is a therapeutic intervention that is offered to families and individuals that, like you said, not everyone is going to choose to do it, but if they know about it sooner and they know it's an option and they are told that it can be effective and healthy, then they may choose that. And we want to give people that option.
Yes,
So-
our goals align definitely when it comes to that.
Yeah, so I know Pam said that we'll put it in the notes, which you will, but maybe just tell people as well, tell them again the name of the movie and the different places they can find it.
Right. The movie's called Diabetes Solution. It's Dr. Bernstein graciously allowed us to use that name because there are no better words to describe what this plan does for people. It is streaming right now on Apple TV, on iTunes. Vimeo is where you need to go to see it anywhere outside of the USA. It's on YouTube and Google Play. It will be up on Gaia soon, and in Mongolia.
And in Mongolia soon.
In Mongolia soon. It is for rent or purchase at the moment, correct?
It is. It's also the number 9 independent film out of all categories of film right now, and it's the number 3 documentary. So
that's fantastic. We hope you win an award because it certainly deserves one.
Well, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled at the response. I think the first wave of viewers have been people, like in the type 1 grit community, but now I'm hoping we get another wave of practitioners seeing it. People can gift the movie. All they need is a recipient's email address. And I know people are giving it to their school nurses, to their diabetes educators. And of course, we're getting positive and negative responses from them, but it's a conversation. Even if there's negative feedback, I want the conversation to start happening.
It has to start happening. People need to get that seed planted so that they can either say, I want to learn. At some point, it'll open a door that says, I want to learn more. What is this about? The first time I ever heard about a ketogenic diet, or I saw people, I said, they're putting butter in their coffee. I'm never, ever, ever going to put butter in my coffee. That's disgusting. And within about a year, I thought it was delicious. And I was like, well, it's just cream. Like, why wouldn't I? It's just cream. Right. So, and we can all learn and we can all change. I've said to somebody one time we were talking about dietitians, and they said, well, the dietitian will tell you this, everything in moderation, And I said, well, there's a lot of dietitians that I work with that have learned new things and they can evolve. And they kind of scoffed and said, people don't already know everything they need to know. People can change, people can learn better and new things that are more effective.
Medical guidelines can change.
The medical guidelines can change, and we are on a mission to help do that. We've got quickly, if anybody's looking for a physician, endocrinologist, a dietitian, coach to help support them in this, we do have a practitioner database. I was going to actually search it before we got on here so I could kind of see how many we have now. There's more and more that will list themselves as knowledgeable for type 1 diabetes. But then there's a search category for specific categories that you're looking for. And it can go by zip code, state, country. There's, more and more these days during the pandemic, more people are available online. I don't know if we've had a way to list that, but just so people can find if they need a support system, a physician support system, and our clinical guidelines are there as well to share. Doug, can you tell me right offhand, because I forgot to look, does it have a section on type 1 diabetes in the clinical guidelines?
I don't think so. I don't remember offhand.
Someone's working on that.
I know that is something that Adele is working on in terms of an addendum. I think like a type 1 specific addendum.
We can't wait till that comes about, and we'll share it far and wide, and we'll make sure we share it with you so that people can bring clinical guidelines to their practitioner that lay out the history of and the things to look out for and the things that can be done. And just like you said, what a menu looks like, what the insulin ratios would be, what to do, so that more and more practitioners are empowered with information to do that. That's right. We need to kind of prompt them and see how far they're getting on the type 1. There's one in cancer in the works as well. Right now, the clinical guidelines are available through lowcarbusa.org if you search, and they'll take you to the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners where they're hosted now, if anybody's listening and wanted to look for those. But yes.
I'm so thankful for you guys taking an interest in type 1 diabetes and helping our community. I mean, we are an underrepresented community.
Absolutely.
Our disease is different than type 2, and I'm so thankful for you guys. And if I can go back to you talking about inviting R.D. Dykman and his son, Dave, I mean, they were the original heroes, right? Giving our community a voice. R.D. has been, at this far longer than I have, and his son, Dave, you think of these kids who inspire others. My little guy is 5 years younger than Dave. And so he's always been looking up to him and we look at the photos and we see Dave taller than his mom and taller than his dad. And it's just,
he's amazing. And he's like, good, get ready to apply for college now.
I know.
But not only that, I mean, he appeared in the, and at Harvard, he did a grand rounds presentation to the physicians and the doctors at Harvard University.
Right.
About type 1 and his experiences and how he manages it. So thank you very much, Bethany, for taking the time to do this with us. Congratulations on the success of this. Your idea was to try and spread the word, but I think I'd be so bold as to say that I don't even think you believe that it would reach as many people as it has. So
it is going to.
That's and it's going to continue to and grow in its reach. So that's incredible. We really commend you on that.
Thank you.
All righty. You've been listening to an episode of the Low Carb USA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/lowcarbusa.